In the quiet corners of Asia, where incense coils curl through ancestral halls, where grief is not whispered, but sung in chants older than memory, there is a silence that follows death, a sacred pause, and yet, sometimes, the silence speaks. Welcome to Whispers of Asia, a channel where shadows tell stories and the dead are never truly gone. Tonight, we revisit the 9th night after a soul has left its body, when the family returns to the grave with folded hands and trembling hearts. But this time, the ritual is incomplete, and the one who should have departed has stayed. Light a candle, offer a prayer, and listen to the wind that remembers her name.
The rain hadn't stopped since the day Lynn was taken from the house in the lacquered coffin, covered with gold trim and red paper prayers that fluttered in the wind like frightened birds. The village had quieted, as if holding its breath. Even the frogs that normally croaked all night along the riverbank seemed subdued, voices dimmed beneath the weight of something not yet finished. Inside the ancestral home, the smell of sandalwood clung to the walls. The scent was dense in the living room where the altar stood, layered with incense, fruits, and carefully arranged cups of rice wine. A photograph of Lynn sat at the center, framed in a circle of white chrysanthemums. Her smile in the photo was warm, even maternal. But now, under the flickering votive candles, her eyes appeared deeper than the image allowed, as if they could still see. Mai knelt before the altar, her palms pressed together, her head lowered. She had lit 3 sticks of incense just moments ago, but one had already burned out too quickly. The other 2 twisted in separate directions, curling away from each other like feuding spirits. She noticed, but she said nothing. Behind her, Lynn's youngest son, Fun, busied himself with stacking the offerings. He didn't kneel, he didn't bow, he didn't even look at the photograph. "Did you call the monk?" Mai asked quietly, still kneeling. Fun sighed, wiping sweat from his neck. "He said he would come on the 9th night. That's tradition." He sounded tired. Mai opened her eyes. "Did he say anything else?" Thun hesitated. "Only something strange. He said the lantern hadn't been lit, that we must be careful." Mai's brow furrowed. "What lantern?" "I don't know, he didn't explain." He paused. "Maybe it's symbolic. You know how old monks speak in riddles?" But Mai didn't think it was symbolic. In their village, monks spoke like wind rustling through dry leaves, never wasted, never empty. When they warned of something, it came from a place deeper than words. She stood slowly, knees aching from the cold tile, and turned toward the window. Outside, the sky was heavy with gray. The village temple sat at the end of the narrow path, just beyond the fields, its orange roof tiles barely visible through the fog. That temple had watched over the village for 3 generations. Lynn had visited it every lunar cycle, lighting incense and whispering wishes into its sacred stone. But she hadn't gone for over a year before her death. That fact clung to Mai now, like wet fabric. "She forgot her prayers," Mai murmured. Fun didn't respond. At the back of the house, a door creaked open. It was Lynn's elder sister, Bang Wai, draped in a mourning white veil. Her eyes were pink and sunken. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand. "Mai," she said hoarsely, "come." Mai followed her into the side room where the air was even colder. A small wooden chest had been opened on the floor, revealing a bundle of red string, dried herbs, and yellowed paper talismans. Bang Wai handed Mai the note. "She wrote this the week before she died," the old woman whispered. "I found it hidden in her altar drawer." Mai unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was rushed, erratic.
If I don't return the binding, I will not pass. They will come for me on the 9th night. If you see the lantern go out, do not light it again. Do not call me back. Forgive me." Mai's heart sank. "What binding?" she asked. Bang Wai lowered herself onto the mat with a grunt. "She never told us, but there was something she did in her youth, a ritual not from this village, something tied to the river shrine." Mai shivered. "The one that was buried in the flood?" The old woman nodded. "There was a reason they let it drown." Mai clutched the letter and looked toward the altar again. The incense had burned down to stubs. The air was still, and yet the photograph of Lin seemed to smile wider. That evening, preparations for the 9th night began in earnest. The family gathered together, the aunts, the cousins, the old uncles who remembered wars and famines. The house bustled with quiet urgency. Offerings were rewrapped, sticky rice steamed fresh. A whole chicken was boiled and placed in front of the altar, its head still intact, eyes glazed over as if frozen mid-blink. Mai oversaw the setup. She was the daughter-in-law, not by blood, but Lin had always called her child, and now that Lin was gone, the duty of carrying the rites had fallen to her. She set out 9 cups of tea, 9 sticks of incense, and 9 coins rubbed clean with salt water. 9 was the sacred number, the bridge between the realms. On the 9th night, it was believed the spirit of the dead would return one last time. If the rituals were done correctly, the soul would find peace and leave. If not, it might linger. Thun poured the wine into small cups and tried to joke with his cousin, but Mai noticed how often he glanced toward the hallway, where Lin's bedroom used to be. The lock was locked, but locks don't hold the dead. That night, as the house dimmed and the moon hid behind clouds, Mai walked out into the courtyard. The old stone lantern beside the gate stood tall, hollow in its center. She leaned in and struck a match. The flame danced briefly, then died. She tried again. This time, the flame hissed. She frowned. The air inside the lantern was damp. She checked the oil basin, full. The wick, clean. Still, the match would not stay lit. Then she remembered the monk's words. The lantern hasn't been lit. Behind her, a cold wind curled through the open gate. It carried a smell, faint but distinct. Not incense, not rain. Ashes. She turned quickly. No one was there, but in the corner of her vision, she swore the photograph on the altar flickered again. The next morning, she visited the temple. The old monk was sweeping the mossy courtyard, his robes damp from dew. When he saw her, he paused. "Daughter," he said, "I wondered when you would come." Mai bowed deeply. "What did you mean by the lantern not being lit?" He leaned on his broom. "There are 2 kinds of light in death. One we see with the eyes, the candles, the offerings, the rituals, but the other is within the soul." He walked to the edge of the temple, gesturing toward the forest path. When the soul dies with a thread still tied, it cannot see its own way out. It wanders in shadow, waiting for someone to light that inner flame. But if no one knows the knot it tied, it stays lost. Mai looked down. She wrote that she didn't return the binding. The monk nodded solemnly. "Then you must return it for her." She blinked. "How?" He placed a small bell into her hand. It was old, bronze, with red thread tied to the handle. "When the 9th night comes," he whispered, "ring this once at the grave. If her soul answers, you'll hear her voice, not with ears, but with the skin. If she does not, then the ground will speak instead." Mai clutched the bell tightly. That night, she couldn't sleep. The lantern outside the gate remained unlit. The photograph of Lin no longer smiled. And in the middle of the night, from somewhere deep inside the house, a soft voice whispered,
You lit it too late." Mai sat up, heart racing. The house was silent, but the air smelled again of ashes, and something unseen had turned the photograph face down.
The rain softened into mist by evening, leaving behind the scent of wet earth and faded incense. The house felt emptier now that the mourners had gone. The last of the relatives had packed up their baskets and folded mourning veils, heading back to their own villages. Only Mai and Thung remained to keep vigil. The silence that followed was almost too complete, a silence that pressed against the walls, filling every pause with its own breath. Mai moved slowly through the front room, carrying a clay bowl of rice and a cup of tea to place on the altar. She knelt, her hands trembling slightly as she set them down before Lin's photograph. The air was heavy with incense from earlier offerings, but she still lit 3 fresh sticks. The thin trails of smoke rose straight for a moment, then curved, not upward, but sideways, bending toward the corner of the room. Mai frowned. "It's just a draft," she whispered to herself. But there was no wind tonight. The windows were closed. Behind her, the old clock ticked unevenly, as though its heartbeat faltered between seconds. Thong had fallen asleep on the floor mat in the next room, exhausted from the week of mourning rituals. He had refused to stay at his own house. "Someone should keep watch," he'd said, though Mai suspected it was less about respect and more about superstition. When someone dies, the family mustn't leave the house unguarded until the 9th night. It's said that the spirit, confused between the living and the dead, sometimes returns home, seeking warmth or memory or unfinished words. Mai placed her palms together, bowed, and whispered the prayer she'd memorized since girlhood. But as she finished the last line, "May her soul find peace beyond the river of light," a faint sound answered her. A breath. It was small, like the sound a child makes when exhaling into a flute, but it came from beneath the altar. Mai froze. For a long time she didn't move. The incense continued to burn, one stick sputtering slightly. The smoke coiled lower now, drawn toward the wooden base of the altar, and from the narrow gap beneath she thought she heard it again. "Mai?" The voice was delicate, almost indistinguishable from wind. Her throat tightened. She leaned closer, whispering, "Mother?" The sound stopped. Only the faint crackle of incense filled the space between breaths. Then something shifted beneath the altar, the small creak of wood under weight, a soft thud like a hand brushing against the floor. Mai backed away, heartbeat drumming. She reached for the lamp on the table, turning the knob. The flame flickered to life, and at that moment the photograph on the altar tilted slightly, as if nudged from behind. The frame hit the surface with a dull sound. "Tung!" she called. He stirred in the next room, but didn't wake. Mai took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and carefully lifted the photograph. Lin's smiling face stared up at her, but the glass covering the frame had cracked diagonally, splitting across her eyes. Her pulse raced. She set it upright again and whispered, "Forgive me if I disturbed you." Then quickly, she gathered her courage and knelt again. Beneath the altar, she saw nothing, only darkness, only the faint shimmer of ash dust that glowed when her lamp caught it. But just as she leaned closer, the incense smoke formed a shape. 2 curls intertwined like hands, reaching toward the hallway. The trail pointed to the locked door, Lin's old bedroom. The key to that door had been missing since the day of the funeral. Thong had said not to open it,
The elders had sealed it with prayer paper to keep the spirit undisturbed until the final rite. But now the air near that door seemed to hum. Mai stood, clutching the lamp, and took a hesitant step forward. Each creak of the floor sounded like a heartbeat in her ears. When she reached the door, she noticed something she hadn't before. The paper talisman pasted above the handle was darkened, its ink bleeding into the wood as if wet from within. And faintly, very faintly, the chanting lines written on it pulsed with light, growing red before fading again. She whispered a prayer under her breath. "May your soul find rest." Something answered from behind the door, not a voice, but a knock. Just once, slow, hollow. She stumbled back, nearly dropping the lamp. The glow from the paper seal faded, the incense smoke scattered, and the silence returned, thicker, heavier, as if it had watched her mistake and decided to wait. She retreated to the altar, sitting on the floor beside Thong. His breathing was steady. He hadn't heard a thing. But as she lay down, she couldn't shake the sound of that single knock. It had come not from anger, but from loneliness. That night she dreamed of incense burning without smoke. In her dream, the altar was gone, replaced by the riverbank under a moonless sky. Lin stood at the edge, wearing her funeral white, her hair unbound. In her hands she held the lantern that would not light. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Lin asked. Her voice was hollow, trembling with sorrow instead of blame. "I tried," Mai answered in her dream. "The wick won't burn." Lin smiled faintly. "That's because the oil isn't oil anymore. It's blood." And then the river behind her turned black, rippling with reflections that weren't hers. Faces appeared beneath the surface, pale, waiting. Mai awoke gasping. Her hands were cold. The incense on the altar had burned down to ash, and faint traces of smoke still hung in the air. But the direction of the smoke was the same, all of it curling toward Lin's locked room. And beneath the altar, the floor was damp. She touched it, water. But when she lifted her hand, her fingers came away streaked with something darker, ash and red, the remnants of burnt prayer paper. By dawn, the mist had returned. The first rooster had not yet crowed, and Mai had not slept again. She stood outside by the gate, staring at the stone lantern that still refused to light. Behind her, she heard Thong's footsteps. "You're up early?" he said. His face was pale, eyes heavy. "I couldn't sleep." "You shouldn't overthink it. Spirits, they come and go. The monk said it's natural until the 9th night." Mai didn't answer. She looked back toward the altar through the open doorway. The photograph of Lin was upright again, but now a faint shadow line ran across her neck in the glass reflection. Thong looked at her gaze. "Strange, isn't it? It looks different in this light." Mai said quietly, "No, it's not the light." That evening, as she prepared the next offering, she decided to sweep beneath the altar. When she lifted the base cloth, she found something small tucked against the wall, a folded piece of fabric, white with dark stains. When she opened it, she found 3 things: a burnt matchstick, a single rice grain dyed red, and a thin strip of parchment with handwriting she recognized. "Do not light the incense again until the 9th night." She closed the cloth slowly. Her hands trembled. Then, somewhere above her, she heard it, a whisper, close enough to feel on her neck. It was her mother-in-law's voice. "Why did you light it twice?" The lamp flickered, and the incense went out. The ninth night drew near like a tide rising quietly in the dark, patient, inevitable. The house had grown colder, though the rains had passed. And in the morning light there was a tightness in the air, like something holding its breath just beneath the skin of the world. Mai stood alone in the courtyard, watching the fog retreat over the rice fields. The trees beyond the road no longer danced in the wind. They only watched, silent and skeletal. Even the birds had left. No song greeted the morning, only the occasional call of a crow, too early in the day, echoing like an omen. Inside the house, preparations had begun. The ninth night was sacred. In their village, it marked the final crossing. If done properly, the spirit of the dead would be at peace, guided across the invisible bridge into the next life. If the rites were disrupted, or forgotten, or rushed, the soul would turn back. Mai's hands moved by memory as she laid out the ceremonial items. 9 sticks of incense, 9 coins, 9 drops of sesame oil. Each item was meant to represent the step, a truth, a vow fulfilled. The number 9 repeated like a chant. She carefully laid out Lin's clothing for the offering fire, the cotton tunic worn at her wedding, the shawl passed down from her grandmother. But one item was missing: her prayer beads. Mai searched the drawers of the family altar. She climbed the small wooden stairs to the attic, opened Lin's keepsake chest, checked beneath the corner mats. Nothing. The string of smooth brown sandalwood beads, worn daily, turned between aging fingers like quiet prayers, was gone. "Tang," she called. He came in from the hallway, half-dressed, still groggy from sleep. "What is it?" he asked. "Your mother's beads, they're missing." He rubbed his eyes. "I thought Bang Wai had them." "I asked her this morning. She said they were returned to the altar after the funeral, but they're not there now." Tang's gaze drifted toward the locked door at the end of the hall. "No one's been in that room," he said, though not with conviction. Mai nodded, her eyes following his. Except maybe her. By late afternoon, the rest of the family began to arrive. Uncles in gray jackets smelling of temple smoke, aunts carrying wrapped trays of food and cloth offerings. Children ran quietly along the walls, warned by their parents not to play too loudly, not to laugh near the altar. Even the smallest ones seemed to feel it, the weight, the quiet that had settled like dust. Bang Wai, draped again in white mourning cloth, entered last. She moved slowly, her hands curled from age and grief, but her eyes were sharp. She carried a small bundle wrapped in red silk. "Have the offerings been blessed yet?" she asked. Mai shook her head. "We're waiting for the monk." Bang Wai frowned. "He should have arrived by now. The 9th hour has already passed." It was true. The sun had begun its descent, and the light had grown strangely yellow, like old photographs turning brittle at the edges. Mai stood outside to check the path toward the temple. It was empty, no figure in orange robes, no bell announcing arrival, just wind, just fog. She returned to the house where the guests had gathered in a loose circle around the altar. The photograph of Ling still rested at the center, but something in her expression had changed again. It was subtle, hard to describe. Her smile had shrunk just slightly. Her eyes, though printed, seemed to follow the room. One of the cousins, a young woman named Tuet, whispered, "The incense burned too fast last time. I saw it, like someone was pulling it." Her brother hushed her. "Don't say that now." Another relative added, "The oil in the lantern outside won't light. We tried 3 times." Tang, attempting to calm them, laughed nervously. "It's probably just the weather." But no one responded. No one agreed. As dusk crept in, the room darkened unnaturally fast. Mai lit the altar candles, but they flickered wildly, as if protesting. She tried again, shielding the flame with her palm. Still, the wicks danced in a wind that didn't exist. Then the chanting began. Bangwai led it, voice low and hoarse with age. Namo Ayida Fat. Namo Ayida Fat. Namo. The room repeated after her, voices uneven, some trembling. Mai closed her eyes, joining in. But the moment her lips formed the third line, she felt it. A breath on her neck, warm and close. She froze. She opened her eyes slowly, looked to her left. No one was near. She looked to the incense bowl. 3 sticks had been lit. 1 had already died out. She swallowed. "Did anyone hear that?" she whispered. Twet raised her head. "The breath?" Mai asked. She nodded. No one else spoke, but the chanting slowed, and outside a crow cried again, louder this time, like a name shouted across water. By full nightfall, the monk still hadn't arrived. "We'll have to begin without him," Tang said, voice tight with unease. "We can't wait any longer. The 9th night is here." Bangwai nodded reluctantly. "Then follow the old way. Line the steps with salt, burn the clothing, offer the 9 coins, light the final lantern." Mai moved to the courtyard with the others. At the edge of the stone path, she began placing small mounds of salt, 9 in total. Each mound was circled with dry rice husks. It was meant to keep spirits from following the family home after the ritual was done. But with each step, she felt something deeper underfoot, a hollowness in the ground like the soil were softer than before, like something had moved beneath it. Tang began to prepare the ceremonial fire pit, the shawl, the tunic, the food, all placed carefully on top of dry paper and leaves. Mai lit the flame. It rose high, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The family stood in a circle. Then came the final offering, the oil lamp. Mai held it in both hands. It had been passed down 3 generations, used only on the 9th night of funerals. It was old brass, with a thin spout and a curled handle. Lin had cleaned it every New Year, wiping it with orange peels and salt. Now, it felt colder than ever before. Mai bent to light it. The match sparked, the wick caught, then fizzled. She tried again. The second match caught fire, danced, touched the oil, and again the flame vanished. Tang stepped forward, striking one himself. The wick lit. It burned, just for a second. Then, a gust of wind, though no wind was there, swept through the courtyard. The flame died, and the lamp cracked down the side, a long jagged split like a vein opening in metal. The family gasped. Someone muttered a prayer. Someone else stepped back. Mai, still kneeling, heard it again. The whisper from behind her. "Why is no one calling me home?" She turned. No one stood there, but the photograph of Ling, the one on the altar, had fallen face down again. And this time, the glass had shattered entirely. The sky was silver gray by morning, a stillness pressing against the air like a tightly closed lid. Clouds hung like faded silk above the treetops. There was no wind, no birds, only a silence that settled not just around the house, but within it. Mai stood before the altar, clutching the brass offering bell in both hands. It had belonged to Lin, used during every prayer, every death anniversary, every quiet evening when the world slowed enough for remembrance. When Lin passed, the bell had been placed beside her ashes. Now, on the 9th day, it was to be rung once, at her grave, to call her spirit home one last time and to guide it across. The bell was not large, but its sound was meant to be unmistakable, a single clear note to echo between realms. Mai stepped outside. The family followed behind her in pairs. Their feet moved quietly across the stone path, offerings in hand, rice, wine, fruit, folded joss papers. No one spoke. Even the children were silent now, clinging to their mother's sleeves. The burial site was just beyond the final banyan tree, marked by an altar of stone, a ceramic name plaque, and 2 sticks of unburned incense left from the previous night. But the soil had changed. The mound of earth that once rose gently above the grave had sunk slightly, subtly, but enough for anyone to notice, as if something had pressed down from within or tried to rise. Mai stopped at the edge of the stone border and looked down. A chill moved through her shoulders. Her fingers curled tighter around the bell. Behind her, Bangwai whispered, "Don't speak of the ground." Mai nodded, and instead knelt. She lit the incense. The smoke rose, then hesitated, swirling close to the earth before curling downward, as if unsure which direction to go. Tong stood beside her, holding a plate of roasted pork and sticky rice. He watched the smoke too, and said under his breath, "The monk should be here by now." But he wasn't. No orange robes appeared on the horizon, no walking stick, no low hum of prayer. Only the family, only the windless sky, and the bell. Mai lifted it slowly. The red thread still tied around its handle was frayed but intact. She bowed 3 times and then, with both hands, struck the bell gently. The bell moved, but it made no sound, not even a dull thud, just the motion, the sway, the expectation, but silence. Mai's eyes widened. She struck it again, harder. Nothing. She pressed it to her ear and shook it lightly. Still nothing. No chime, no echo. The bell was hollow, empty, as though the sound had been taken from it, stolen by the wind or swallowed by the dead. Bangwai took a step forward. "Let me try." She knelt, took the bell, and struck it with a practiced flick. Nothing. Auntie Twet tried, then Tong. 4 hands, 5 strikes. No sound. Only the crows in the distance answering with their hollow cries. The family stood frozen. In all their years, they had never known the bell to fail. It was more than tradition, it was belief. The bell called the spirit to rise and follow. Without it, the soul might wander, might forget where to go, might come back. Mai looked down at the grave again. The incense sticks now leaned outward, smoke brushing the dirt like fingers. She whispered, "What do we do now?" Tong opened his mouth to speak, but stopped, because behind them, someone had arrived. But it was not the monk. A man in a temple caretaker's robe approached from the path, a younger assistant Mai had seen before, but never spoken to. His face was pale, eyes sunken. He bowed. "Forgive me for arriving late." Mai bowed back. "Where is Master Triu?" The assistant looked away. "He has not returned." There was a pause. The wind moved faintly through the nearby trees for the first time in hours. Bangwai asked sharply, "What do you mean?" "He left the temple 3 days ago to gather bamboo and did not return. We searched the outer woods, found his staff near the river shrine, but no footprints, no trail, only ashes, small ones." Mai felt a pressure build behind her eyes. "Did he say anything before he left?" The assistant hesitated, then nodded. "Only that something had been left unfinished, that he had to correct a mistake he made 20 years ago." The words sank like stones into the still air. Bangwai closed her eyes. "He was Lin's first funeral guide." Mai whispered, "But she didn't die 20 years ago." "No, but that's when she made a vow." The sky darkened further, though it was not yet noon. The family finished the offerings in silence, laying down the food, the folded clothes, and the joss papers shaped like gold coins and lotus shoes. They burned the paper quietly, watching the flames dance, but not rise high. Mai set the bell down beside the grave. She did not strike it again. Instead, she turned to Tong. "We should return home before the hour turns." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on the grave. "Do you hear that?" Mai paused. "What?" He tilted his head. "The bell." Mai turned back. It was still on the ground, motionless, unstruck. But now it made the faintest sound. Not a chime, not a ring, a breath, like wind inside metal. A sigh. Mai stepped toward it, kneeling, holding her hand above the bell without touching it, and in that instant, only she heard it. "You never finished the binding." The voice was not angry. It was sad, desperate, old. That night, back at the house, Mai placed the bell on the altar. She did not speak to it. She did not ring it again. She prepared the night tea and lit the final candle. The flame burned blue for a moment, then white, then nearly invisible. Tong sat beside her in silence, turning the prayer book over in his hands. The room felt too large, the shadows too long. The air was colder than it should have been, even with the windows shut. Then Mai noticed something on the floor by the hallway. A single bead, brown, sandalwood, worn smooth. She picked it up slowly and saw, just beneath the wooden altar cloth, another bead and another. They formed a path, leading to Lin's locked bedroom door.
Night fell early. The moon hid behind a veil of cloud, and the village seemed to fold in on itself. Even the sound of insects, so constant, so familiar, had vanished. Mai lay on her side in the guest room, staring at the cracked ceiling. Sleep came in shallow waves, never fully arriving. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the bell again, silent, cold, echoing with nothing. When she rose from the mat, it was just past midnight. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and moved to the hallway. She didn't know what she was looking for, only that something still waited, like a question suspended in the house's walls. That was when she heard it. A voice, not inside the house, but far off. A chant, low, drawn out, familiar in rhythm, but strange in tone, like a funeral prayer sung in reverse. Mai moved quietly to the back door and stepped into the courtyard. The air was heavier than it should have been, as though mist had thickened into cloth. The chanting came again, faint, from beyond the trees, toward the river. She turned her head and held her breath. Yes, that was it. A line repeated over and over, broken syllables trailing like incense smoke. Return what was never offered. Then silence. Then again, but farther, as though the voice itself was walking away. Mai stepped back inside, heart pounding. The next morning, she asked Ban Lai about the chant. The old woman stiffened. "You heard it?" "I think so." "Did it come from the east?" "Yes." Bang Wai exhaled and turned toward the family altar. She went there once, long ago, to the river shrine. Mai frowned. "I thought the river shrine was gone." "It is now. It collapsed into the water after the flood, but before that, it stood on a wooden platform above the river. People used to go there to pray for forgiveness. Forgiveness for what? The old woman hesitated. For taking what didn't belong to them. Later that afternoon, Mai sat outside with Tuyet, the cousin who had noticed the incense burning too quickly. Tuyet spoke softly, her fingers pulling at the hem of her sleeve. There were stories, she said, that Ling wasn't born in this village, that she came here after she married your father-in-law. No one ever talked about her home, not even her. Mai nodded. She said little, always quiet, but she knew the rites well. Too well. What do you mean? She knew rituals even the elders forgot. She could recite prayers no one else remembered. When my uncle died, she helped prepare his spirit paper, and she folded it with 11 turns. We were taught 7. Mai felt the chill again, the kind that came not from weather, but from knowing you'd stepped into a story that hadn't finished telling itself. She was hiding something, Tuyet added. That's why she went to the river shrine. I overheard her one night, years ago, whispering that she had to unmake a vow before the water reached the altar. Mai's thoughts spiraled back to the monk's warning, that something had been left unfinished, that the light could not be lit. Do you know what kind of vow? Tuyet had her head. Only that she cried after, not from sorrow, but fear. That evening, Mai walked toward the eastern edge of the village. The trees thinned where the land dipped into marsh, and the old stone path disappeared beneath overgrown grass. She followed it anyway until she reached the edge of the river, where the current whispered against dark rocks like a tongue against teeth. The platform was long gone, but the foundation stones remained, half sunken, cracked and mossy. She stood there for a long time, listening, waiting. Then from somewhere across the water came a soft sound. A bell. Not hers, not metal, wooden, hollow. It struck once, then twice, in slow intervals. Mai turned slowly to leave, but something caught her eye among the reeds. A strip of red cloth. She bent and picked it up. It was soaked, but intact, hand-stitched, a prayer charm. Unfolding it carefully, she saw the ink was still visible, though smeared. Symbols lined the edge, but the name at the center, the most sacred part, had been scratched out. Not faded, removed, erased with intention. She returned home before sunset. At the altar, she placed the cloth beside the broken bell. Bang Wai stood beside her in silence. Then the old woman spoke. If she made a vow and erased her name from it, the spirit can't be called back. Mai turned. Why? Because the river remembers. The shrine might fall, the platform might rot, but the water knows. Mai sat beside the altar and pressed her palm over the broken charm. The chanting, she said, was calling for an offering. Bang Wai nodded. But we already gave everything. Clothes, rice, coins, tea. The old woman whispered, but not the one thing she kept. What? Her secret. That night the chanting returned, this time closer, and this time more than one voice. The 6th day after Lin's funeral came with a strange stillness.
It wasn't the silence of rest or peace, but something waiting, holding its breath. The sky was gray again, though no rain had fallen. The trees no longer swayed. Not a single dog barked in the village. The incense at the altar still curled, but more slowly than before, as if reluctant to rise. Mai swept the altar room early that morning. The floorboards felt colder than usual. The ashes from yesterday's incense didn't scatter when she swept. They clung together, heavy, as if soaked in dew no one had seen fall. When she reached the urn, the one holding Lynn's cremated remains, she paused. It looked different, tilted slightly forward. The thin layer of ceremonial cloth draped over it was disturbed, wrinkled, as though it had been lifted during the night and hastily replaced. She gently removed the covering and leaned closer. Inside the transparent lid, the ashes had shifted. They no longer sat in a neat mound, as they had the day after cremation. Instead, they had spread upward, dusted against the inside of the urn's walls, floating toward the lid like smoke trying to escape. Mai's throat tightened. She knew this sign. She had heard it only once before, in the whispered warnings of an elder monk. When ashes float upward, against the law of gravity, it means the soul has turned its back on death. And if the movement flows upstream, against the tide, it is searching for something it left behind. That afternoon, she told Bang Wai what she saw. The old woman sat down hard, as if her legs gave out beneath her. "No," she whispered. "She's resisting." "Resisting what?" "Crossing." "Why?" Bang Wai's hands trembled as she pulled the prayer book from the altar shelf. She flipped through the worn pages until she found the passage, tapping her finger on the ink. "Here, listen." Her voice shook as she read aloud. "If the dead have left an offering unblessed, or a rite undone, their essence may drift, their ashes may rise, their soul may turn upstream, away from the river of light, and toward the place of unfinished oaths." Mai whispered, "She must have buried something, something that wasn't meant to be kept." Bang Wai met her eyes. "We have to find it." The village shrine keeper, an old man who rarely spoke and almost never left the temple wall, arrived without being summoned that evening. He appeared at the family gate just after sundown, wearing his old tattered robe, his staff wrapped in red prayer ribbon. He didn't bow when Mai greeted him. He simply said, "She buried something in the garden long ago." Mai led him inside. They lit no candles. He preferred the dark. He moved through the ancestral house like someone who already knew it well, as if the walls had spoken to him in secret years before. In the back garden, beside the tamarind tree that Lynn had always tended, the shrine keeper stopped. "She came here after the miscarriage," he said suddenly. Mai blinked. "What?" "She lost a child before your husband was born." Mai's breath caught. "She came to me in secret, brought something wrapped in red, and said she could not carry the grief any longer. Asked if burying it would keep it silent." He pointed to the base of the tree. "She buried it there, but the earth does not forget." With trembling hands, Mai dug into the soil. It wasn't deep. Just beneath the surface, her fingers found a package, wrapped in silk, stained with rot. She lifted it slowly. The cloth unraveled easily, as if waiting. Inside was a small bundle of items: a child's anklet, never worn, a faded ultrasound photo, and a note written in Lynn's sharp, tight script. and a single charm shaped like a lotus cracked down the center. Mai opened the note last. "Forgive me, little one. I could not carry you in this life. I named you, then buried your name. May the river take you away from me, not back to me." Her vision blurred, not from fear, but from sorrow. The kind that lived beneath a woman's skin, the kind that spoke in silence. The shrine keeper nodded. This was her unfinished offering. This was what turned her soul upstream. They brought the bundle inside, placed it on the altar, and lit 9 sticks of incense. Banghua began the prayer for lost children, a rare chant reserved only for stillborns and spirits that never took breath. As the chant filled the house, Mai noticed the urn. The ashes had settled, back down, as if it finally at rest, no longer reaching, no longer searching. But as the 9th line of the chant was spoken, a sound filled the room. The wind chime outside, untouched for days, rang once, then again, then silence. That night Mai dreamed of the river again. This time, Lin stood waist-deep in the water, holding something wrapped in red silk. Her face was calm, her eyes clearer than they had ever been in life. "I buried her wrong," she whispered. Mai stood on the shore. "She heard you tonight." Lin nodded. "I wanted to forget." Mai stepped forward. "Now you must remember and let go." Lin looked down at the bundle in her hands, then lifted it into the water. The current took it gently, carrying it like a paper boat. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting silver over the surface. Lin looked back one last time. Then she faded. Mai awoke with wet cheeks. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and inside the urn, the ashes lay still, as if they had finally remembered gravity. Morning came with sun for the first time in a week. Soft and pale, it crept through the bamboo slats of the ancestral home, laying long lines of gold across the altar floor. For a moment, the house seemed warm again, as though the rituals of the past nights had settled something, or someone. Mai opened the altar room window to let the incense smoke drift freely. The air smelled sweeter now, still perfumed by prayers, but without the bitterness of unease. Thong sat at the wooden cable, leafing through the family genealogy scroll. His fingers moved slowly, reverently, across the delicate rice paper. "Her name," he said. Mai looked up. He was staring at a long vertical column in the center, a record of the family tree, written by hand over generations, from the first ancestor to the newest child. "Where is it?" he whispered. Mai walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. She leaned over his shoulder. He pointed halfway down the scroll. Between her father-in-law's name and his own, there was an empty space. No ink, no name, only a pale void where Lin's name had always been. Always. Mai had seen it 100 times. Lin Tron, wife of Tien, mother of Tong. But now, nothing. She ran her fingers over the gap. The parchment was smooth, clean, no signs of erasure, no tear, no water damage, just blank, as if no one had ever written anything there. "That's impossible," she murmured. Thong stood, face pale. "She was here. It was right here." They brought the scroll to Banghua, who squinted at it through her cracked glasses. "She's been unrecorded," the old woman whispered. Mai shook her head. "What does that mean?" Bang Wai pressed her lips together. It means something karmic has been undone. By whom? By her or someone else. When a name disappears without damage, it means the soul has been disconnected from lineage, either through spiritual betrayal or unfinished debt. But she was family. Blood doesn't prevent karmic unraveling. Sometimes it invites it. They took the scroll to the village temple. The priest on duty, a gentleman in his 60s named Father Kit, examined it beneath sunlight. He turned the paper over, tapped it with his knuckles, lit incense beside it, and watched the smoke. "He's not lost," he said finally, "but he's separated." "From what?" Mai asked. "From remembrance, from the karma of name." Father Kit sat cross-legged on the floor and began to explain. "In our beliefs, the name holds power, not just for the living, but for the dead. When your name is written on the family scroll, your spirit remains tied to generations. Prayers reach you, ancestral offerings find you. But if your name is removed, not forgotten, but erased, then your spirit drifts. It cannot return for offerings. It cannot descend for peace." Mai felt her heart sink. But who would erase her? Kit shook his head. "Sometimes it's not a person. Sometimes it's the karma of the vow. If she broke something sacred, the name unbinds itself." He looked into Mai's eyes. "Did she ever speak of a spiritual agreement, a ritual done in secrecy, something she later regretted?" Mai remembered the dream. Lin in the river, the red cloth, the buried charm. "Yes," she said, "she made a vow she tried to forget." Kit nodded slowly. "Then her name has returned to silence, and silence must be fed before the name can return." That evening, Mai returned home with the scroll. She laid it back on the altar and lit a single candle beside it. She placed Lin's photograph beside the empty space, whispering, "I see you, even if the paper forgets." She wasn't sure why she said it, but it felt right. That night, just before sleep, she heard a sound at the altar. Not a whisper, not a creak, but a soft brush, like a brushstroke on parchment. She rose, barefoot, and stepped into the altar room. The scroll was still open, and beside the empty space there was now a mark, not a full name, not a word, but a single line of red ink, drawn vertically, delicate, incomplete, as though someone had started to write. The 9th night arrived quietly. There was no rain, no wind, only a stillness so complete that even the breath of the trees seemed held in reverence. The moon was half covered, dim and pale, like a coin dipped in ash. Mai stood at the altar, dressed in white. She lit 3 sticks of incense and placed them in the bowl beside Lin's photograph. The faint red mark on the family scroll remained unchanged. No name, just the beginning of one, a gesture waiting to be completed. Outside, the family gathered again, somber, silent, faces drawn and hands clasped. It was time. The final ritual, the farewell. They walked in single file toward the burial ground. No one spoke. Each step forward felt heavy, not with grief alone, but with dread. Not fear of the dead, but fear of what might still be undone. The air along the path felt strange, not cold, not warm, just thick, like walking through memory. The grass near the grave had grown unnaturally tall in 1 week. The stone markers that once lined the perimeter were askew. A crow feather rested on the offering slab, black and soft and perfectly centered as though placed with purpose. Mai reached the mound first and stopped, because there was no mound, only a hollowed depression in the earth, a deep, unnatural dip, as if something had sunken from within. The soil around it was disturbed, not like weathered erosion, but freshly collapsed, cracked, split down the center. She knelt and reached toward the edge. The dirt crumbled easily beneath her fingers, revealing something darker below. A void, not just an indent, a hole, a tunnel, a descent into the earth. She looked back at the others. Tan stared wide-eyed. Bang Wei had already begun whispering protective prayers beneath her breath. "The grave has opened," Mai said softly. "No," Bang Wei corrected. "The grave has been unmade." They approached carefully, circling the depression like mourners afraid to waken the dead. The incense sticks trembled in Mai's hand. Someone asked, could animals have dug it? But no, there were no scratch marks, no claw prints, no signs of movement from above. Only a sinkhole of silence. Mai lit the incense anyway and planted it firmly at the edge. She placed the wrapped rice, the salted fish, and Lin's favorite tea on a clean cloth beside the grave. The food steamed in the cool night air, but the smoke from the incense did not rise. It dropped, downward, slipping into the hollow, pulled by something unseen. And far below, from the darkness inside the earth, a sound echoed upward. Not a voice, a breath, long, slow, damp with sorrow. Mai stumbled back. Tan reached for her, steadying her arm. Bang Wei whispered, "She has returned." Mai shook her head. "No, she never left." They stood frozen for several moments, unsure of what to do next. Then, from behind them, a lantern glowed, faintly. One of the cousins pointed. "It's her room." They turned. The house, still visible from the hill, flickered with a single flame in the window of Lin's old bedroom. A room that had been locked since the funeral. A room with no lit candles. The family rushed back in silence. When they arrived, the door to the bedroom was ajar. No one had the key. No one had entered since the day Lin's body had been taken from it. Mai stepped in first. The room was dim, lit only by moonlight leaking through the bamboo blinds. And in the center, sitting neatly on the floor beneath the window, was a lantern. Its wick still warm. No oil, no match in sight. Beside it lay a trail of sandalwood beads, leading in a circle, surrounding the lantern like a protective ring. Mai picked one up. It pulsed faintly with warmth. Then from the altar behind her, the bell rang once, a clear, pure chime. It hadn't sounded in days. The family stood around the altar again. The urn was still, the ashes unmoving. But the name on the scroll, the red vertical mark, now had 2 strokes beside it, incomplete but growing, as though someone unseen had begun to write her name back into memory. They returned to the grave at sunrise. The depression in the ground had closed. Not fully, but the hole had softened. Edges caved in like a sigh. The offerings were gone. Not scattered, not eaten, just vanished. Only the incense remained burned down to ash, forming a circle in the soil. No wind had touched it, no foot had disturbed it. And Mai, standing beside it with her hands folded, whispered, May your name return. May your vow be undone. May you rest. A crow flew overhead, just one, then vanished into the morning mist. And from far below the earth there came no sound, only silence. But this time, it did not feel empty. It felt complete.
Dawn came pale and hesitant. The sun did not rise. It leaked like something wounded, bleeding light slowly across the clouds. The color of the sky was neither gold nor gray, but the ashen hue of candle smoke clinging to cloth. Mai stood at the kitchen basin, washing rice for the offering. Her hands moved in rhythm, but her mind wandered, not backward, but downward, into the hollow beneath the grave. Even now she could feel it, not a physical pull, but a soft memory calling from underneath. She drained the water. The grains stuck briefly to the bottom of the bowl, then shifted slowly toward the center, forming a swirl, a spiral. By mid-morning, the family returned to the burial ground. There was no ceremony planned for this day, no official rite. The 9th night had passed, and with it the last prescribed ritual. But nothing felt finished. The earth had tried to swallow something, and it had not succeeded. So they returned, not to mourn, but to listen. Bangwai instructed that a temporary altar be set beside the grave, a folding table covered in white linen, a tokut, a photograph of Ling, 2 red candles, and a bowl of rice with a single stick of incense planted at its center. Mai added a plate of tea-soaked sponge cake, Ling's favorite. But something was missing. No bell, no priest, no chants. Only the wind whispering low, and the fog thickening slowly around them. Tong brought a small drum, as was customary for closing rites. He struck it once, a hollow sound. Then again. But the 3rd time, nothing. The leather had gone soft, damp, soundless. He struck harder. Still no sound. The drum had gone mute. The candles flickered wildly, despite no breeze. The incense smoke did not rise. It twisted sideways, then downward. Again, always downward. And then from the fog, someone emerged. A figure in a monk's robe, tattered at the hem, feet bare and wet with mud. It was him, Master Triu, but older, grayer, bent, as if the time away had aged him years. He walked slowly toward them, cradling something wrapped in black cloth. The family parted as he approached the altar. He looked at Ling's photograph for a long moment before speaking. "She called me back," he said. His voice was weaker than Mai remembered. Tung stepped forward. "Where have you been?" The monk looked toward the earth. "I went to retrieve what should not have been buried, but the river took it." He unwrapped the cloth bundle in his hands. Inside was a broken staff, the same one he had carried during Ling's funeral. Its top had split in 2. The prayer bells tied to its head were gone. "I struck the earth," he said, "but it did not answer." Bangwai whispered, "Did she speak to you?" The monk nodded slowly. "She did not say words. She did not use sound. She only offered silence." He placed the broken staff on the altar. Then he knelt and folded his hands. Mai followed. So did the rest. Together they began to chant. Not the funeral prayer, not the name returning him, but the chant for unbinding, an old prayer rarely used,
a chant to release a soul from unfinished karma, even if their name had been forgotten, even if their vows had been swallowed by water and time. Namo Bungbo, Namo Go Sorido, Namo Durnkwaive Komkan Tengoi. The wind rose, the fog tightened, and the candles went out, one by one. The monk raised his voice, not louder, but deeper, not from his throat, but from memory, from somewhere beneath language. He struck the staff on the ground, once, twice, a third time. Crack. The wood snapped fully in half. And then the fog scattered, as if something had inhaled deeply and disappeared. The silence that followed was complete. No wind, no crows, even the sound of breath felt distant. Mai opened her eyes. The rice in the offering bowl had cracked down the center. The cake had grown cold, and the incense had burned to the root without ash. Vanished. The monk stood. He looked at Mai, his eyes wet but unblinking. She has let go. Of what? She asked. Of needing to be remembered. Mai felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she didn't know had formed. But her name is still missing from the scroll, she said quietly. The monk gave a soft smile. Then remember her in silence. He turned to leave, walking into the fog that had begun to retreat. But as he reached the edge of the field, he paused, and without looking back, said, "Some souls are not meant to be named, only honored." Then he vanished into the trees. Back at home that evening, Mai returned to the scroll. She opened it slowly. The space where Ling's name had once been was still bare, still blank. But there, beneath the empty space, a red fingerprint, pressed gently, as if from the other side. The evening air hung thick with the scent of burned paper and wet soil. Though the 9th night had passed, and the monk had come and gone like a passing shadow, the house did not feel settled. It felt paused, as if time had inhaled and refused to exhale. Mai sat alone at the family altar, her hands folded, her eyes on the scroll. The red fingerprint beneath the blank space where Lin's name should have been had not faded. If anything, it had deepened in color overnight. She hadn't told anyone, not Tun, not Babwangai, not even the monk. It felt like something Lin had left only for her, a farewell or a warning. She placed her hand over it and closed her eyes. Some souls are not meant to be named, but some promises are. The next morning, a messenger arrived from the temple, a folded note, handwritten, smudged with ash. Come before sundown, alone, bring the thread if you have it. True. Mai read it 3 times before it sunk in. She didn't know what thread he meant, but something in her memory stirred. She went to Lin's room. The door had been unlocked since the 9th night. No one had dared to shut it again. Inside, it smelled of old tea leaves and sandalwood. Everything was untouched, except the lantern beneath the window. It had gone cold. Mai searched the drawers, the wardrobe, the boxes beneath the bed. In the final drawer, wrapped in yellowed cloth, she found it. A red thread, thin but strong, wound around a paper scroll aged and sealed with wax. She unrolled the thread slowly. At the center, tied to its length, was a copper coin, square-holed, marked with characters that shimmered faintly in the light. It pulsed in her hand, alive. She arrived at the temple before sundown. Triyu was waiting beneath the Bodhi tree, his hands clasped, his eyes shadowed. He led her inside without a word. They passed the incense room, the chanting chamber, the library of sutras, and stopped in a small side hall she had never entered. Its walls were lined with cloth charms, shelves stacked with stones, bowls of water that reflected only shadow. At the center, a black cushion and a single candle. Triyu gestured for her to sit. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, pointing to the thread. Mai shook her head. "Only that it belonged to her." The monk nodded. "It is a red binding thread, a sacred cord used in karmic vows. It connects two souls in love, debt, or protection." He took the thread from her gently. "She broke this vow," he said, "and the thread was never burned." Mai's voice was soft. "What does that mean?" Triyu sat opposite her. The candle between them flickered. "When someone severs a karmic thread without closure, one soul becomes trapped. They cannot cross. They wander not bound to memory, but to the promise they abandoned." He looked down. "She tied this thread with another, and she cut it. The coin is the anchor. It holds the weight of what she owed." "To whom?" Triyu exhaled. "To a spirit she never named." He placed the thread in a bowl of water. It floated for a moment. Then, slowly, it began to sink, the coin dragging it down like an anchor. When the thread vanished beneath the surface, the water darkened, turning murky, thick, as though ink had spilled into it. From the bowl came a faint sound, a child's hum, familiar, soft, sad. Mai's hand flew to her mouth. "I've heard that, in dreams, in the garden." Triyu nodded. "It is the other half of the vow." Mai's throat tightened. "But she lost a child before Tun. She buried the charm. We honored it." "She lost more than one," Triyu said. "She made a vow with the first, and when the second died, she broke it." The monk poured the water out onto the earth beside the temple altar. As the liquid touched the ground, steam rose, carrying the scent of something sweet and burning. Rice wine, baby powder, red silk. He took the thread from the bowl, now wet and heavy, and placed it in a wooden box lined with salt. "We will burn it tomorrow," he said, "and when we do, she will no longer be pulled between promises." Mai stood. Her heart ached with a grief that was no longer hers, but inherited, passed down from a woman who had spoken too little and held too much. Before she left, she turned to him and asked, "If she couldn't say the name of the spirit she owed, will it still find peace?" Triyu looked at the candle, its flame now steady. "No spirit waits forever for a name, only for someone to remember why it was lost." That night, Mai returned home. The house was still. She went to the altar and lit one candle. As she placed it beside the scroll, the wax pooled faster than usual, running in a perfect circle around the base. And in the center of the blank space where Lin's name should have been, a faint curve, the beginning of a character, drawn in red wax. The candle burned late into the night. Its flame moved slowly, as if dragged through time. Mai sat beside it, watching wax pool around the base and harden into rings, each one whispering that something had been missed, again. The scroll still lay open on the altar. The red fingerprint beneath the nameless space had faded to a dusky shadow, but above it, a single stroke remained. Not a name, not a word, just the beginning of something, And somehow it felt wrong. Incomplete, yes, but also incorrect. Like trying to write someone's name with the wrong hand, or for the wrong person. At dawn, Mai returned to Lin's bedroom, searching not for answers, but for presence. A weight, a scent, a forgotten voice. She opened the bottom drawer of the old vanity. Inside were a bundle of letters, a rosary of sandalwood beads with 2 missing, and, at the very bottom, a leather-bound album. She opened it carefully. Photographs stared back, sepia-toned, frayed at the corners. Lin as a girl, braided hair, a toothless smile. Then another photo. Lin again, but beside her, a girl identical in every way. Same braid, same eyes, same dress, but not the same expression. This girl looked away from the camera. Her hand rested lightly on Lin's shoulder. And beneath the photo, scrawled in red ink, now faded, Lin and... The second name was blurred, as if wiped away by a wet thumb long ago. Mai turned the photo over. Nothing on the back. She flipped through the rest of the album, searching, breath quickening. But the twin never appeared again. Only Lin, alone. She brought the photograph to the temple. Triyu met her at the steps, already waiting with prayer beads in one hand and an old incense fan in the other. He took one glance at the image and closed his eyes. "I feared this," he said. Mai's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Who is she?" He looked up. Her sister, her shadow. "You knew?" "I suspected. There are signs when a soul tries to cross, but is tethered to another it once mirrored." Mai swallowed. "A twin?" He nodded. "But the bond of a twin is not just of blood. It is of spirit. When one dies, the other must carry the rites for both. The offering must be doubled. The prayer must be split." Mai looked at the photograph again. She never spoke of her. "No," he said softly, "because the sister died too young to be remembered. A child, a still spirit." He walked slowly toward the inner hall. When a twin dies before being named, her soul stays close, not malicious, not jealous, just forgotten, unfed. In the temple's inner chamber, Triyu opened a lacquered box filled with folded red paper charms. He placed the photograph inside and whispered a prayer. "We must invite her in," he said. "To the altar?" Mai asked. "No," he replied, "to memory." That night, Mai set up a second altar beside Lin's, smaller, humbler, with no photograph. Only a bowl of sweet rice, a cup of tea, and 2 incense sticks laid in a cross. She lit a single candle. Then, for the first time, she spoke out loud not to Lin, but to the girl beside her. "I don't know your name, but I see you." The flame bent, not from wind, from acknowledgement. At midnight, the house grew heavy. Not dark, just heavy, the way silence becomes a presence. The 2 altars flickered in harmony, the flames leaning toward each other. Mai closed her eyes and saw it. A dream. 2 girls running through a field, red silk ribbons tied to their wrists fluttering behind them. One laughed, the other followed. The sky above them was bright, not from sun, but from something warmer. Then suddenly the ground split, and only one kept running. Mai awoke in tears. She lit another candle, and beneath the second altar, where nothing had been placed, a single sandalwood bead, whole, unbroken, sitting in a pool of cooled wax. In the morning, she returned to the scroll. The space where Lin's name had tried to return was now blank again. But above it, for the first time, a line of characters she didn't recognize. She brought it to Triyu. He studied it, then smiled, not with joy, but with reverence. "It is not her name," he said. Mai frowned. "Then whose?" "The one who waited beside her." He traced the letters slowly. Nwet, the moon that was never named aloud. From that day forward, 2 incense bowls were kept on the family altar, one with a photograph, one with only silence, but both with fire. And every 9th day of every month, Mai would light 2 candles, one for the mother she had known, and one for the sister she had not.
The 12th morning broke with haze thick as gauze, muffling the horizon in a soft shroud of gray. It was not quite fog, not yet mist, but something older, something that felt woven from forgotten breath and the steam of old incense. Mai stood barefoot in the courtyard. She wore white again, but not the mourning white of loss. Today's white was for repentance and reparation. Behind her, the family waited in silence, dressed not in black or white, but muted shades of brown, gray, and blue. There was no official rite scheduled on this day, no ceremony written in the temple books. But it had to be done. A ritual undone must be remade, not repeated, mirrored. Inside the ancestral house, 2 altars stood now, side by side. The first, for Lin, was unchanged. Her photograph remained, her name still absent on the scroll. The second, smaller, bore no image, no written name, only a folded piece of red cloth, a bowl of sweet rice, and a lotus blossom placed atop a pillow of salt. The girl with no name had waited too long. Today she would be called, not with voice, but with action. Tri arrived just before the sun touched the tips of the banana leaves. He carried no staff this time, only a brass bowl and a string of fresh red thread. When he stepped into the altar room, he bowed to both spaces equally. Then he spoke. "This is not a funeral," he said. "It is a return." He turned to Mai. "You will guide it. You are the one who saw her, the one who heard." Mai nodded. Her hands did not tremble, not anymore. She had learned to carry silence as language. They began with the offerings. 2 sets. 2 bowls of sticky rice with sesame salt. 2 cups of lotus tea, sweetened with honey. 2 folded robes, one white, one gray. 2 coins, cleansed in salt water and dried with leaves. Mai placed the first before Lin's altar, then the second before the silent one. 3 watched, whispering words that had no modern meaning, chanting syllables so old the language crumbled as it was passed through his lips. Then came the thread. Mai stood between the altars and took the red string from the monk's hand. He motioned for her to tie it. She stepped forward and gently looped one end around Lin's incense bowl. Then she stepped sideways and tied the other end around the second altar's bowl. A red line now connected the 2 spirits, visible, vulnerable, and vibrating faintly.
3 said, "This is the bridge." They lit the incense next. Mai struck the match, her fingers steady. She lit Lin's first, the smoke rising gently, curling toward the ceiling. Then she turned to the other bowl. As the flame touched the incense, it let out a sharp crack, like a dried twig breaking underfoot. The smoke rose too, but slower. It curled not upward, but outward, spreading, sweeping across the floor, reaching toward Lin's altar like fingers in search of warmth. The red string began to tremble, not from air, from memory. Then the chanting began. Mai spoke first, voice low and reverent. "You who bore the body and left behind the breath, and you who bore the breath and were left without the body, come together now in silence and in sound. 2 paths, 1 river, 1 light." The family repeated the words, even the children, even Tun, even Bang Wai, who had not spoken in 3 days. The chants grew steady, winding through the house like smoke. The monk stood at the doorway, eyes closed, hands pressed together. He began his own prayer, one not meant to be echoed, a binding chant spoken only once in a generation, designed not to trap a spirit, but to release 2 souls tied in error. His voice dropped into a near whisper. "You were not meant to carry this alone." 1 name was spoken, 1 was buried in the breath, but the earth remembers both. Outside, the wind picked up, the leaves stirred, and the fog rolled in. The house grew colder. The candles bent sideways, then stilled. And from under the floorboards, or perhaps from the hollows of the wall, a low hum began to rise. Soft, feminine, not a warning, not even a cry, a lullaby, unfinished, unvoiced, until now. Mai stepped back between the altars and untied the red string, gently, like unbraiding a story. As the thread loosened, the smoke between the 2 altars parted, no longer curling toward each other. Now they rose together, parallel, as though the 2 spirits no longer searched for one another, but walked forward, at last, together. The monk took the thread and folded it into a lotus made of prayer paper. He placed it in the brass bowl, then set it aflame. The paper burned bright, then darkened, but there was no smoke, only light. It hovered for a moment, then vanished. And when it did, the red mark on the family scroll finally bloomed. Lin's name returned, with 1 small change. Next to it, in smaller writing, nestled like a shadow. Get, born together, passed together. The sky was pale with dusk when they returned to the burial ground. It had been days since the mirrored ritual. The air was different now, not warm, not cool, but still, as if the land itself had settled into listening. Mist coiled around their ankles like memory, low, soft, familiar. The grave no longer sank. The altar was intact. 2 bowls now rested upon it. 2 names now etched in the scroll. The monk stood beside the family, quiet and watchful. He raised his hand. We begin the final part of the rite, the unbinding of steps. Mai had only read of it once, in a funeral scroll that spoke of forgotten twins, karmic mirroring, and the ritual of the 9th step backward. "It is not a walk away," Triu had said the night before. "It is a release. The body returns to the living, the spirit stays where it belongs." The rules were simple. Each family member would approach the altar, light one stick of incense, then turn, slowly, and walk 9 steps backward. Without speaking, without looking. The 9th step must be made in trust, without fear, without calling the name of the dead. Because if the name was spoken, or the final step faltered, the spirit might follow home, not in malice, but in confusion. Mai volunteered to go first. She approached the grave in silence. The soil looked soft but undisturbed, as if Lin and Wiet had finally sunk beneath the surface in peace. She knelt and lit her incense. The flame caught easily. She waited until the smoke began to rise, straight, uncoiled. Then she stood, back straight, hands clasped, and turned away, facing away from the altar. 9 steps, one by one, back into the world of the living. The first step felt light, the second unsure, the third echoed on the stone path. By the 4th, the mist curled higher. By the 5th, the silence deepened. By the 6th, she felt her breath tighten. By the 7th, her heel brushed something, a leaf perhaps, or a memory. By the 8th, her fingers trembled, and by the 9th, she heard it. A step, not hers, just behind, perfectly timed. Mai froze. She wasn't supposed to turn. She knew that, but the breath behind her was soft, familiar, as though someone waited, not to follow, but to be seen. And so she turned, gently, slowly, and there she was, a girl, not a ghost, not a vision, a girl the shape of a shadow. Her face was neither Lin's nor entirely unfamiliar. She wore white, hair braided, eyes large, barefoot on the soil. She did not speak, she only smiled, and lifted her hand. In it, a red thread, unbound, unknotted, offered. Mai bowed, tears rising to her throat. "You can rest now," she whispered. The girl blinked, then stepped backward, one pace, then another, until she vanished into the mist, as if she had only been waiting for permission. Mai turned again. The monk stood ahead, unmoving. The rest of the family watched in silence. No one asked what she had seen. They didn't need to. Because when the others took their 9 steps, one by one, they too walked slower. They too turned quieter. And some, like Mai, wept without knowing why. Bangwai was lost. Her steps were slow, deliberate. Her voice did not speak, but her lips moved silently. A name, perhaps, or a prayer meant only for the ones who walk with fog. That night, the wind returned, gently. It stirred the trees, lifted the scent of ash and rice and flowers, and carried it upward, as if delivering something long delayed. Inside the house, the 2 incense bowls still burned. One flame curled to the left, the other to the right. Neither crossed, but neither faded. And for the first time in 9 nights, the altar felt whole. No footsteps in the hall, no whisper in the walls. Only quiet, true quiet. Mai sat beneath the lantern at the gate. Its flame burned steady now, and when she closed her eyes, she no longer felt watched, only remembered.
Dawn arrived without sound. No rooster called, no cicadas stirred. Even the trees, tall and old as stone, did not whisper. The morning air was wrapped in fog, thick, slow-moving, sacred, the kind of fog that turned fields into seas and footsteps into prayers. The family gathered one last time. This time, there was no incense, no drum, no scroll, no photograph, only breath, only presence, and silence. The monk arrived just before sunrise. He did not carry his staff, only a candle, unlit. He handed it to Mai without a word. She understood. This was not a rite for the dead. It was a rite for those who remain. They walked together, slowly, down the familiar path toward the burial site. It was no longer a grave, not really. The earth had risen slightly, as though it had taken a final breath and then exhaled. No altar stood, only the ground, clean, still, waiting. The monk stepped forward. He bowed once, then again, and a third time, so deeply that his forehead touched the earth. He stood, turned toward the family, and raised both hands. Then he began the chant. It was not loud. It did not fill the air. It barely left his lips. But the fog responded. It shifted, parted, revealed. Figures stood at the edge of the field, barely visible, neither solid nor vanishing. A woman in white, a girl with her hair in braids, a small child barefoot, clutching a string of beads. They stood in silence, watching, not waiting, not mourning, witnessing, as if the living were the ones being remembered. Mai stepped forward. She held the candle in both hands, its wick still unburnt. She raised it slowly. The monk struck a match. The flame was small, soft. It caught quickly. And when it did, the figures in the fog began to move. One by one, they turned, walked. No urgency, no sorrow, only a calm, steady rhythm, like steps following a river. A procession, into the mist. Ling walked first. Her face, clear in that moment, turned back just once, not to say goodbye, but to bow. Gratitude, forgiveness, peace. Then she turned and vanished. The fog closed behind them like curtains drawn at the end of a play. The candle in Mai's hand flickered once, then stilled. The monk whispered the last line of the chant. And when the soul no longer calls your name, you will know it has arrived. Back at the house, they placed the candle on the altar. It burned longer than any flame they had ever lit. No wax dripped, no smoke rose, just warmth, just presence. That evening, the lantern at the gate glowed gold. The wind returned gently, curling through the halls like a lullaby sung to the bones of the house. And in the altar room, 2 incense bowls rested side by side,
One carried Ling's name, the other carried none. Both were full of ash, but neither asked for more. Outside, the field swayed, and somewhere beyond what eyes could see, a procession continued, not of the dead, but of the remembered, of those who had finally been let go, and those who had finally let go in return.